Welcome to the side event called the Toward a More Inclusive Future, Advancing Implementation of the 2030 Agenda. It's my great pleasure to be a moderator of this side event. My name is Steve. I'm the organizing partner for Major Group for Children and Youth, and we have a list of 3 speakers who will deliver remarks on how voices that are left behind can be advanced in implementing, reviewing, following up, and monitoring the progress of the 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development.
I don't think we have a way to compare what humanity is going through now from 2015. So much has happened. Let us say that we have reached the point of no return in the environmental agenda, and at the same time we met with COVID came and it exacerbated all of the previous problems, and now we think the assessment is perhaps 40 years of regression of human rights in most all of the fields in developing countries, and also a huge, a bigger gap between developing and developed, because developed countries entrenched in their bunkers and with all the compliance of developed citizens, developed countries' citizens. There is a compliance. I don't see any manifestation on the street with indignation of the crimes against humanity that they're committing right now with the vaccine injustice. I think all of us activists are kind of schizophrenics, because on the one hand we fall on the worst of the despair because we see everything so blatantly, and then we rise. But then I have the huge hope, and then we go and we're here and we're talking with this empty wall that gives us back. It's like a blank stare, but we keep on coming back and we keep on talking. And I think that psychotic breakdown that we have all the time is helping us, because that is what giving me hope. I keep coming back and listening to you all and engaging with all of you actors with the richness and the wealth of your conversation.
I think that hope is in general a bit destructive word, because I prefer not to hope but to act, because hoping is sometimes delaying, the action. And in general, what moves me, and I think also many of us, it's in Russian we have a phrase "делай что должен и будь что будет," which means do what is necessary and let it be.
It's very simple for me. As they slogan it to be the global social contract, and if it is really the global social contract between people and the governments of the world, I think it's high time they start walking the talk on the Agenda 2030's ambitions. In terms of the concerns, yes, regression is a concern. Until we do not stop prioritizing consensus ahead of ideology and critical considerations, we're going to keep experiencing such sort of regression. And in terms of being hopeful, if a single ray of light can pierce the heart of darkness, then I feel that civil society, is it psychotic or not?
Wow, I'm just struck by the stat you just shared that almost 50% of the indicators in Asia Pacific don't have the data collection infrastructure developed. I mean, what's the point of HLPF? Isn't that literally what this is about? That's insane. What would be some prioritized action items for the region of Asia Pacific, or specific countries within Asia Pacific, to monitor progress from year to year? What would be some recommendations?
I think I spoke about it. The hegemony of trade and investment agreements, for instance, that has a lot of implications for developing countries. I spoke about the illicit financial flows. I mean, it's a very important and interesting dynamic. Who is developing who? If I'm talking about 2013's data, then $2.1 trillion in the same year were taken out from developing countries when we received $134 billion for financing for development, for instance, right? So these are some of the issues that most of the developing countries are facing, and that is what we need to figure out in terms of how do we address that.
The SDGs are a global agenda, and let me tell you one thing. even if we fulfill all the SDGs, given that the SDGs left out the major debates on concentration of wealth, it's not going to solve anything. We need to tackle the extreme issues that were left out of the 2030 agenda, because that was at the core of the interests of the powerful players, and they were trading that with our developing countries, and the other way around. I mean, women's human rights were left out, and even UN Women now says, oh, our mandate is women's empowerment. Excuse me, let me remember, it's women's human rights. So really, if we get too alienated with the SDGs agenda, we stop seeing the reality. So it's not about the targets or even the indicators. It is about what is out there, what are the systemic issues. But really, when I was saying I'm an old activist with the old school, it's like going back to our mapping and doing real incidents on the ground, like how can we move these countries' positions, how we can talk to negotiating blocs, and not just 2 weeks ahead when they're sitting negotiating the declaration or an agreement. It is an ongoing work that means global solidarity in monitoring global processes. But I also have some radical questions. We really need to start flooding the human rights treaty bodies with complaints on crimes against humanity committed by corporations, by all of these governments, on climate change, on COVID, on vaccines, on privatizing public services, on extraterritorial impacts, on investor-state dispute settlement, on the invasion they're doing on debt, and lack of proper response for the impacts of environmental and biodiversity degradation, etc. We need to stop being so formulistic. I mean, formulistic is fine, and there are people who can do that, but we can also be just, childish and irreverent and say we're flooding your offices all around the world and wherever you're showing up, because we need to make this binding, because survival is at stake. We need to be creative, we need to be irreverent and bold and just unformalistic, really, to demand that these are crimes against humanity, this is genocide, and whatever you lawyers can bring of beautiful words that nobody understands, but we need to say, yes, that committed that crime, and just to start raising awareness that the human rights treaty bodies need to wake up. They cannot keep on treating case by case basis. They need to realize that the systemic order is leading us to a point of no return, and they need to take steps on that. And of course, with the US saying, oh, well, I'm not a part of that, I think the US citizens have a real target ahead, and all of the northern citizens, and go back to that again. You need to reassess your efforts. Stop bringing your colonial presence to our global south, and start doing your work with the EU, with your governments, with Japan, with Australia. People say, oh, New Zealand. No, New Zealand is the same. So just keep up the work and do advocacy. So if not, bring them to the human rights treaty bodies, or do strategic litigation and sue the US government and sue Japan and sue Germany. This is the time in which we really need to step up and not be limited. Oh no, the human rights frameworks this human rights treaty body only receives complaints 2 days a week on January. I'm sorry, we're dying. So I think we need to start doing just absurd, stupid things all over the place, all around, plus the formalistic ones, and start suing everybody. But that's just me, because I'm wild.
I don't know how to applause without disrupting the microphone in a Zoom setting.
Yeah, just wanted to say, I mean, there was a lot that was compromised during the SDGs negotiation process when it comes to key human rights and binding frameworks. So we perhaps, that has to come back to the table. Like Emilia said, that, we have to go back to the basics on that to perhaps reorient the development programming that we have right now. And for that, one of the alternatives that we're trying to pitch through this neoliberal development model is development justice, which then pretty much ticks the boxes when it comes to redistribution in terms of economics, and then in terms of environmental justice, in terms of accountability, in terms of prioritizing the dignity and human rights considerations at the core of the agenda because we keep saying, the transformation and all of that, but we're unsure how that's going to be tracked if human rights considerations are not at the heart of it.
People associate with power structures that work for them. And I don't think this was particularly just unique to Canada. This is, I see this everywhere, that people associate with power structures that work for them. And I believe that what we're trying to do here is to ensure that we're changing and shaping the power structures in a way that they would work for us, that they would work for all people, that they would work for everyone who's at the margins, those who are vulnerable, not just for the few at the top, not just for the majority, but for every one of us. And I'm so honored to be here with champions who've been working on this subject for a very long time.